Hi there. Haven't made a video for a while again. Sorry about that. We'll get back on it. I've had a few requests on other videos for a video about making scenes in a little bit more detail. Now, I thought that scenes were a fairly basic thing in the Headrush, but it seems not. So let's address the subject. After looking at the comments, it turned out that all the requests were from JCTheKeeWee. So I thought I'd had loads, but it's JC banging me on the back of the head until I make a scenes video. So here we go. You ask, you shall receive. Well, you ask repeatedly, you shall receive. Scenes. So what I've got here is a fairly standard rig with an amp, some modulation, some overdrive and some delay. Because we're talking about scenes, I always run in scenes and I always turn off in the global settings auto assign foot switches. So when I add a new effect to the chain, it doesn't pop up as a foot switch. My foot switches stay completely blank, as you can see. That's because I use a scene for everything. Even if it's just to toggle one pedal on and off, I still use a scene. And I'll show you why. So let's make a scene. We'll just have an amp and a cab in the first scene because it's going to be the basic sound of everything. So we go to assigns. There are our 8 buttons. Bottom right one, we're going to make a scene. So you need to add a block that's in the rig. I'll choose the amp. And instead of having it as latch, we'll change it to scene. And instead of it being called scene 8, whoops, I forget you can't drag in there. I'll call it standard, which is what I always call the bottom right preset scene thing. So let's edit that. I always make it green, the bottom right one, and it's the standard sound. So there's the amplifier. I want the amp on. There's the IR. I want the IR on, but because it's always going to be on, I leave it in no change. That saves the Headrush from having to unload the IR and then reload the same IR, because I'll get a little bit of processing power back if I leave things that never change as no change. Everybody else can go off because we don't want them on, and off, as most of us know, is the opposite of on. So there we go, amp on, IR on, it's green, it's only got one switch state, we should be done. So we close that, and now we've got a scene called standard. There it is, with my socket foot. Close this, so I push that, nothing will change because that amp's on. There we are. Okay, so the most common thing you would want to do after that in a scene is switch a couple of things on for a solo, say. So let's go back into assign. I always put the soloing up the top to keep it out of accidental pushings way. So once again, just add a block, turn the amp on, change this to scene. I'm going to call this one solo, and tick, and I'm going to edit that. I'm going to make it red because I always make my solo in red so that when I glance down I know we're in hell for leather mode. So once again, we want the amp on. I'll leave the IR in no change. This time we also want the delay on, and I want the overdrive on. Everybody else can be off. Off, off, off. The default when you add a block is no change. So if you ever add a block after you've made a scene, you'll have to go back and turn it on, off, or no change, because they all get added in no change. So now here we are. Overdrive on, amp on, delay on, IR still on, everything else off, and it's red. So we close that. Now we've got 2 buttons. We've got the green one, and then we've got the soloing knob. Yay, all good. So now we can see the power of scenes. So with one push to standard, those 2 go off. One push, those 2 come on. Let's go a little bit further. Let's add another amp. Let's add a clean amp. So in the amp block, you always get this little ×2 button here. I love the ×2 button. And then you get offered these 2 types of ×2. This one uses both the amps. This one switches between them. There's a little icon for a switch, so I like that one. So now we go over here, and I'm going to put, yeah, the Jazz Chorus Standard in there is what I want. Where is the Jazz Chorus? I can never find it because it begins with J, and that's one of those complicated letters, isn't it? Right, okay. So, what does that sound like? Doesn't sound like anything because we're still in the other scene. Let's create a new scene and add the clean amp. So this time I'm going to add the amp as per. I'm going to make it a scene. I'm going to call it clean. I would have coloured it blue if it weren't already blue because I like blue for clean. Now you notice this has appeared down here, doubling switch, because we've added another amp in that block. Now you can either do A, which is the top amp, or B, which is the bottom amp. That's how you remember it, B for bottom. So this time we're turning on the B amp, not the A amp. We'll turn on tremolo, because why not? White boost off, green overdrive off, amp on, delay off, ambiverb off, we'll have the reverb on, and don't change the IR. So hopefully now a push of the clean button, if the guitar was on, does exactly what we asked for. So it's turned on the tremolo, it's turned on the reverb, and it's switched the amp. So if I just push the standard button, now you see the standard button is going to need editing, because the standard button needs to know that it's amp A. Previously, when there was only one amp, it didn't matter if it was on no change. The solo one is already on A. So there we go. So now the clean amp, the standard amp, the solo amp. So that's taken us that far. Now when I said earlier I don't use toggles at all, I'll show you what I mean. Let's pick the tremolo. So what I would do, because I'm running everything in scenes, I would just add the tremolo like that. I would turn it into a scene. And you'll say, why are you doing that, Steve? You could have left it as a toggle. You'll see. We'll call this tremolo because that's what it is. Tremolo. Delightful Italian word. Now we edit that. So everybody is going to be in no change this time. Everybody. Because the only thing we're interested in is the tremolo, which we're going to turn on. But we're also going to turn it off. So switch state. Let's add another switch state. So in state 1, the tremolo, which I always think of as purple, colour it purple. In switch state 1, the tremolo will come on. Everybody else won't change. In switch state 2, the tremolo will switch off. Everybody else will no change. And when it switches off, I'll leave it purple. Oh, you'll see why in a second. Okay, so now, if we push our clean button, we should have a button that toggles the tremolo on and off. But let's just go back and edit the clean button so the tremolo starts off. Okay, so now with our clean button, let's put that on screen. With our clean button, that's the state, and then when you push the tremolo button, it comes on. Second state goes off. First on, second off. Now, that seems a little more complicated than just leaving it as a toggle. Here's the reason why I've done it how I've done it. If we go back to the tremolo and edit it, we can have it first state on and use a preset. Let's call it slow. Second state on and use a preset fast. So first press, tremolo on, slow. Second push, tremolo on, fast. So now we're getting more complicated. And how do you turn it on? Off, you say? Well, we took it out of clean. It's off. in there. So the clean button is your off button. So you're playing, you push your clean button, you want tremolo. There's a very slow tremolo. Push tremolo again. Fast tremolo. Want to turn it off? Clean button. That's good for things like the rotary, where you can ramp it up and down with the one button. This thing's amazing. People say that Headrush has bad reverbs. I don't think so. You just got to learn that this shouldn't be up here. Tone control. Scenes. Right, so I think we're there with scenes. That's how you make a scene. That's how you assign a scene. How do you get rid of a scene? There's no delete button for the scene, is there? No, you can right click and left click, all you like. To get rid of a scene, you just turn it back into an ordinary stomp and then you unassign it as normal. Gone. So that's that, how to make scenes. I am making a video comparing the Quad Cortex with the Headrush because I think it will surprise a lot of people. There's a lot of Quad Cortex based channels who say it's the industry standard and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And there's a lot of Headrush channels who get ridiculed because it's a Headrush. I think it's time we proved they are equal. And I'll do that in another video. And until then, enjoy your Headrush and bye for now.